Okay, I'm Gary Cullen with Ruby today.
I'm Ruby White.
And I'm Jim Dwight.
And what's the date today?
What is the date today?
September
23rd September
Yeah.
Yep.
2017.
Okay. All right. Well, just start
You want to ask
talking.
questions?
Where do we start?
When did you come out here, Ruby?
Came to Point Roberts in '66.
And what brought you out here?
Well, it's a very long story that you should probably be spared. we came by way of Chwauson. The economy in North Idaho, where we were raised, was on the skids. And Canada was advertising for Americans with business experience and/or equipment to please come to Canada. So we moved to Chwauson, where we didn't know anybody in the whole country and didn't have a job and didn't have much money. And by coming to Chwauson, we discovered Point Roberts and were intrigued by it.
So what was it that made you decide to come down here?
Oh, I used to come down here a lot. I made up excuses to come down here. I came down here and bought kite string for the kids.
Oh yeah.
I came down here and bought licorice because it tasted better than the licorice over in Canada land.
Well, we used to do that from Chwauson too. Come down to Ben's store because it was better candy.
Yeah, well, so we just made up excuses, and finally, one day I found this wonderful old house that reminded me of the one we had left in Idaho, and it was for sale. And
Where was that house, Ruby?
over on Kendor, it was the old Waters house.
How old was that house?
At that time, it was, I think it was built about 1927, something like that. You deduct that from 66.
That's 50 plus 50 years. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
It was a wonderful old house.
So then explain to us your connection with Gary and Jim.
Well, Jim's family built right next door to us while we lived in Chwauson. And Gary was this delightful young student who was working on something that was called a hologram, and he kept trying to explain it to me, and I never understand that sort of thing. But he would bring me in little samples, and one of my special ones, he knew I liked eagles. He brought the little eagle thing that in a frame that finally just disappeared, and little pieces of jewelry. My favorite was a pair of dice in a little necklace, and we just watched his progress, and I knew he was a success when he hired his family.
So Gary, he's interested in talking about the Reno property. Maybe we should talk about that with him and your history with Reno, our Reno.
for the history, the history of the property, even going back, we sort of went back to find that it was the Williams family that originally built the home and barn there, I believe. Is that right?
I believe that's correct. The Williams were from the reserve over at the Chwauson Band. Very, very, very fine family.
So just for reference, the Reno property is the Reno Ranch up by
The Reno Ranch.
up by the Monument Park,
Northwest
by
corner,
yes.
the golf course. Some people would want to know
Yes.
the references to that.
Well, it's just opposite the golf course. And he actually owned the property that the golf course is on too.
I think it was 180 something acres. Did we read?
I couldn't tell you. I wouldn't even guess.
It might have even been more than that at one
Okay.
time. It
At one
was
time.
sold
Yeah.
off piece by
Yeah.
piece. Yeah.
2 parcels there. And it's my understanding, well, actually Reno told me that he had a hair, well, let's go back and find out how come he got into the hairdressing business. He had a bunch of sisters and he used to cut their hair. And he said he knew that you couldn't patent how to cut hair, but he said I was pretty darn good at math, so I formed a triangulation formula. And I got a patent on my haircuts. So he set up a studio down in Long Beach, California, and he said one day this girl came by and she caught his eye, and then she came in, and it turned out to be Gloria Pelcher, whose family had inherited, I suppose, part of that property through the Williams family. And he wound up marrying Gloria, and she brought him to Point Roberts, and he called it the Triple R Ranch, Reno R Reno. And he had Black Angus cattle up there. Also, the ponds that the golf course have, Reno had dug with the bulldozer to keep bullfrogs in. He had imported the bullfrogs for the heron to eat.
Wow.
Wow.
I didn't know that.
That's interesting.
That's interesting.
Well, Reno was an interesting cat. He was. One time, Gloria had a car accident over at Chawson and destroyed their 4x4. And Reno just nonchalantly drove a red Cadillac out from under the hay in the barn. He had a lot of things. He bought a used coffin one time.
What did he use?
What did he use it for?
Well, it had belonged to some county, and they used the coffin to have funerals for destitute people, and they would just use it long enough to have a service and then put it away for the next destitute funeral. And it came up for sale, and Reno bought it. You never know what you're going to find up at Reno's.
Were those ponds, were they spring fed?
Yes,
They were.
yeah, they absolutely were. Probably still are, I suppose.
Yeah, Gary and I were up there a couple of weeks ago, and I don't think there's anything left up there, is there?
Not on the west side of the road, no. We walked through where
They're going to build.
they're going to build, yeah.
And there's no ponds.
There's no pond there. The lower part of the property, even though it was so dry, the grass was very green. And when you walked through it, it felt like it was probably
Mushy.
Well, the ponds are over on the present golf course
yeah,
side.
yeah.
Well, the ponds on the west side are marked as wetlands in the
Oh, are they?
and the new construction maps for the houses that
Yeah.
are going in.
I guess they just leveled it all out or
Yeah.
something. Yeah.
But they're still very
Yeah.
wet there.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, that's been George Hodgins was going to build a hotel there, and there've been a lot of proposals. So we'll see.
But Hodgins, he bought the whole Reno property at first,
No,
did he? No, he only
no.
bought the west side?
He only bought that west side
Okay.
chunk.
Okay.
Now, Ron Nielsen and his group bought the golf course property,
Mhm.
everything on the east side of the road.
Okay.
That's always just been a golf course waiting to happen there. It was just a perfect site for one.
So what do you think about the new golf course ownership going in? Any?
I don't have any thoughts at all about the new golf course ownership. I'm just damn glad that it's being restored, because
Restored,
I
right.
understand it was ready to be a hayfield.
Yeah, it was pretty badly, let go pretty badly. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Was it only this year that it wasn't running? It
I
was-
think so. Last
Yeah.
October, I think they closed it.
So it just got overgrown this year?
Yeah.
They didn't mow it at all during the year, so everything got or water it, so it got overgrown and the greens all died.
Oh.
Ruby, do you know any history of the old Sunset Cafe that used to be on the Reno property?
I do.
Can you let us know about that?
Well, yeah, Gloria had a sister who was married to a Danish fellow, and they lived here in the summer, and Reno would travel between here and Long Beach with his hair studio. And one summer, when Reno came back, he found that his brother-in-law, the Danish gentleman who was carpenter, had built the Sunset Cafe out in the hayfield, and the girls were running it. And it was a success, and oh my God, was that good food.
Was it really?
People lined up out in the field just to get that food.
That would have been the late 1960s, was it? Or?
It would have been the early
Probably.
Early 60s?
Early
No,
60s.
no, late 60s.
Late 60s.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and maybe the early 70s. I don't know, how long did you think that lasted, Polly?
Not long. I said less than 5 years.
Oh,
But
yeah,
I'm
but
not sure.
much less than 5
Less-
years.
yeah.
It was just kind of a whim. It started because at one time they'd all been eating and somebody commented that you girls are such good cooks, you ought to start a restaurant. So while he was gone, the brother-in-law built the Sunset Cafe, and I don't think they bothered with permits or any of that sort of jazz. They just put the building up in the field, and my God, it was good food. I still think of what wonderful food that was.
Yeah, her name was Hazel, wasn't it?
Yeah, I believe you're right.
Hazel, yeah.
Now, she's the one that had a son named Ray?
I'm not sure.
Because we had somebody on the Facebook site that Ray Sawyers, I think his name was.
No, this was
No,
a
was it?
Scandinavian name.
Was it? Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, she married Ib Andreasen.
Okay.
Yeah.
So maybe this other person had worked at the Breakers and then came and ran the Sunset Cafe just for a short time
Huh.
with her boy. She was a single mom, I
Possibly.
think.
The other thing that Reno did manage to do, besides patent his hair cutting, was he called it the Reno Curly Cut, and he licensed people to use his hair cutting system. And that involved they had to go to Long Beach and intern with him to learn how to do it and get permission to use it and to advertise the Reno Curly Cut. So he's probably the only person in the world that ever figured out a way to patent a haircut.
Reno University, eh?
Well, it was at his salon down in Long Beach. He was a very interesting character.
I recall meeting him a few times when I worked at the Esso gas station in Tawasin. He used to come in with his old Cadillac, and he'd give me his credit card and the Reno R Reno. I was so impressed with.
I think his name was actually Hanson. He told me. I'm not. I think Hanson was.
Yeah,
the
I think
name.
his middle initial was Ralph.
Yeah. His last name was Hanson, or
Well, that is his original name.
Original,
yeah.
But no,
Yeah.
he legally became Reno Ralph Reno.
Yeah. For Hollywood.
Who knows why Reno did anything? He just did stuff. Whatever he thought about doing, he did.
Alberto's sister actually went to his school down in Long Beach. Xenia,
Yeah, she
she
did.
attended school down there. So one girl from Point Roberts
Oh.
attended his school.
Yeah.
Do you have a copy of his book in the
I don't.
archives?
No.
Because they come up on eBay once in a while.
Oh, they do?
They do, yeah.
They were on. They were on Amazon. There were 2 copies
Was
about
there?
2 weeks ago.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure there's probably
I'll have to get one
all
from
the
the
used book
archives.
Yeah.
salespeople.
Yep.
They put them online. so
And they're
out there.
pricey,
Oh,
Probably,
pricey.
yeah.
over $100. Yeah.
Oh, yikes.
Well, I
But there's
passed
a nice
it on.
picture of him in there.
I passed it on to Stephen because he's been curious about seeing one of those books. The
Oh, yeah.
fellow who was a hairdresser here locally now.
Mhm.
Whether he got one or not, I don't know.
Was Reno the last owner of that property before it was sold commercially, or?
Well, of course, Reno passed, and so Gloria was technically the last owner of the property.
I was just where I was going with this. Was there when they were vacated the farm property there? Was there any antiques collected or memorabilia from that farm at all?
I don't know.
I
There,
guess.
there would have been, or there had at least been the used coffin. Would have been on the block, I would
I
think.
remember an old horse pulling plow that was sitting in the field there that was rusting
Yeah.
away.
There was,
I actually have a picture of it, but maybe it's in somebody's yard down here somewhere.
Gloria had several complete sets of expensive china, different brands and patterns. And I believe she bought a house down on Lake Whatcom in Bellingham. And so I think anything of real value such as that probably went with her down to Bellingham. But as to the rest of the stuff, I have no idea, no clue what happened.
I was just thinking with the age of that property there must have been some pretty old items that I was wondering if the museum had maybe got their hands on anything.
No, back then,
No.
nobody paid attention.
Nobody
probably.
paid attention.
No.
Everybody had junk in their yards,
Yeah.
so nobody paid
Yeah.
attention.
Yeah. It was at that time. It was junk, right?
Yeah.
You didn't think it was a collectible.
Well,
so-
there's a rumor of, has always been a rumor of something that may or may not be on somewhere in that property or in that general area, and it's a good story if nothing else.
Okay.
Back in the early days, Chinese people were, this is ironic, Chinese people wanted to live in the United States and they weren't allowed. So there was a local entrepreneur who would go into Chinatown in Vancouver and assure groups of Chinese folks that he could bring them to the United States. And they would pay him, agree to pay him, and he would bring them out here in the dark of night, show them the post office sign, and he'd finish his payoff. Then when the sun came up, they'd realize, yeah, they were in the United States. But
Now they needed a boat.
they were pretty limited. So the story goes that one group decided to retaliate. So the entrepreneur decided he had to do away with them, and he threw them down a well over on the west side. That's a good story, if nothing else. And you know it's
Wow.
even possible.
Hey, you never know.
You never know.
Oh, no, you really don't. It's kind of spooky over there. So,
So did the Renos have children?
no,
No.
no.
So I guess George Hodgins then must have bought that piece, the west piece, from Gloria directly then.
Yes, he did. Thereby is a story I'll keep to myself. Yeah, he had every intention of having a hotel there, and hired an architect from Calgary to design it. Sean's probably got a drawer full of that information out of there.
Yes, I remember that. It was big news at the time.
Oh, yeah.
Front page news, wasn't it? With a picture of a huge hotel.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and we regularly have enough rumors to fill all these imaginary hotels too.
Yeah. What might have been.
If all these things had come true, Point Roberts would be a big city by now.
It would have.
Big metropolis.
Shopping malls and,
Yeah.
you know, shopping malls, hotels. I
Yeah.
think that article that was in the Vancouver Sun on Reno said that they were wanting, or the developers wanted to develop the point, 18,000 people.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so, you know, quite an increase compared
Yeah.
to our,
You'd have to
Humble
stack them pretty
1300.
high.
yeah. So they have big visions back.
Oh, there
Big
been
visions.
Big visions.
a series of big visions.
What are some you remember?
Well, probably the one that comes to mind first is Swanson McDonald's proposal down at Boundary Bay.
Oh, yeah.
They were going to develop, they were actually going to build more sand out into the bay and then create little canals through the sand and thereby create more waterfront property and then sell that waterfront property that they've created by putting more sand out in the bay. And they were proceeding along with that, and Pat Whalen, who owned the property, was certainly cooperating with them on that. But Swanson McDonald had some misfortune. One of them had been a vacuum cleaner salesman who married a very wealthy woman in Vancouver who was funding his portion of it. And their marriage went afoul, and there went the money for him. And the other one was hanging out with a motorcycle gang over in New Westminster, and he misbehaved in some manner, and they beat him to death with chains. So there went that glorious scheme, but they had all kinds of drawings about how they were going to do that. Do you remember that, Polly?
I remember the scheme and maybe seeing drawings of the canals and houses and
Oh, yeah.
bring your boat up.
Like Palm Island?
Yeah, and isn't there in Birch Bay Village, don't they have canals over there too?
I don't know.
I'd heard that there are some canals over in Birch Bay Village, just wondering if they got the idea from there or
Oh, possibly.
maybe just straight from Florida, I don't know.
So when was this scheme?
1964, probably,
Wow.
or 5.
Okay, that's pretty ambitious.
For then,
Yeah. Pretty ambitious.
Isn't that about the time where you had the fewest population here, out here on the point? Didn't it drop down to like 600
I
or?
was living here then. I was living over in Chawson.
There weren't that many here.
It had dropped down.
Probably under 1,000, definitely, yeah. Yeah. And there's a guy named Hulla who was, I think he may have been taking out options. Do you recognize that name, Ruby Hulla?
Yeah, he was here just before I came here. He was optioning property, and I don't know what his grand scheme was.
I'm not sure either.
And then the Wallace brothers were optioning property for, oh gosh, what was his name that owned the cable over in North Van? Sid Welch.
Oh, yeah.
Sid Welch was funding a proposal, and poor Sid Welch, he was a nice man, and this county ran him ragged with studies. I will guarantee you that there is a large closet full of studies at Point Roberts, and every time the poor man would complete the study, then they'd come up with another one. And at one time, you'll think I've been smoking dope or something, but at one time, he complied to a request from this county to count all the birds and flowers on Point Roberts. Now, I figure any bird worth counting flies around, it could be counted more than once, but poor Sid Welch funded that. He did all kinds of engineering studies, and that wouldn't suit him. Whatcom County at that time had our very first planner, one Harry Fulton, recent graduate of UBC. And his prime occupation seemed to be to order studies. I remember sitting down there in Bellingham when Mr. Fulton reviewed a most recent engineering study that Mr. Welch had provided. And he said, well, that was all well and good, but he'd like to have another one by engineers of his choosing, but Mr. Welch was to pay for it, and Mr. Welch said, okay. I was almost apoplectic because I got thinking, tell him no! For God's sake, any information that anyone would ever like to have of a technical nature is somewhere in a closet down in Bellingham because they were preposterous.
Was his property, Sid Welch, was that the Lily Point property?
Sid Welch had a comprehensive plan for all of Point Roberts.
Oh, okay.
He had optioned up the bulk of the point, and that included a proposed marina, golf course. It was a planned unit development,
Okay.
which would have been attractive. And he had secured foreign investment money that would cover it. And their final paperwork wasn't complete yet, but would be within a few days. So as the options technically ran out and he didn't renew them because they're going to go in and do the actual purchase, when this money got into the bank. Well, one local gentleman found out about this. I'm going too far.
No, 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 no. Which local gentleman found out about
We
it?
may not, I don't think we should go there.
History here.
I've gone as far as I could. Anyway, a local gentleman found out about it and went and purchased one of the key properties that had been optioned,
Okay.
thinking that he could hold them up. Well, what happened was when the word came out that all of the property was now no longer available, then the big money that was to come forth didn't come forth, and the whole thing blew. And the local entrepreneur was stuck with this property
Okay.
that it was now his.
Okay.
And it wasn't key to anything. But that was a sad story.
Okay. Interesting.
It was very interesting.
So what about Fitch? Didn't he buy up a lot of property at one time? You told me about Arthur, was it Arthur Fitch?
Finch,
Finch.
Colonel Finch.
Colonel Finch.
Polly can tell you more about Colonel Finch.
I don't know that much about Colonel Finch.
Well, basically, it's my understanding that during the tough times during the Depression, people lost property for non-payment of taxes, and he would ride in and buy it up very, very cheaply from the county for taxes. So he held a lot of acreage on the point.
It's interesting, all the people that have, just the turnover of the property through the years. Everybody's big dreams, and then they just never come to fruition.
Well, Mr. Finch was an opportunist.
Yeah.
I ran into a client at one time that had met Mr. Finch back when gold was pegged at $32 an ounce and you weren't supposed to sell it. There were groups of people that got together and bought and sold gold, and Arthur Finch was one of them, and this old coot from down in Utah was another one, and he'd met Colonel Finch at one of their illegal gold meetings, and Finch had assured him that he could buy up and control Point Roberts, that he could get all the people to agree with him that they would sell to him and he could put in a casino at Point Roberts. And of course, none of that was accurate, but I met an interesting client through that. And Mr. Finch, I think, probably had ideas of what he could engineer that would increase the value of his vast acreages at Point Roberts. They weren't always for the benefit of the point.
Golly, they were talking casino way back then? Because that must have been in the 60s, 50s?
It was in the 70s.
70s,
Wow.
okay.
Okay.
There have been some schemes to take over Point Roberts, haven't there?
Yeah, the International Joint Commission, I wouldn't hold Mr. Finch innocent of that,
No.
nor Mr. Fulton, our first county planner. That was a nightmare.
Wasn't that the, how you organized the Voters Association? Wasn't that the beginning?
That's why we organized the
Right.
Voters Association, because in our naivete, we had formed the Point Roberts, can't remember what our organization was.
What's it called?
Community
Community
Association.
Yeah.
And that was composed of Americans and Canadians, the summer people and the year-round residents, to kind of represent the community to the county. So it had been suggested to us by our first county planner that we should do this thing, and that we should enumerate what our goals were, what we really wanted, and what our problems were. So, like a bunch of dumb clucks, we had meetings and we all turned out and And we were having one such meeting one night when someone drove in from Bellingham and said, guys might as well go home, because this has just been turned over to the International Joint Commission. And the whole goal of the IJC was to make Point Roberts the headquarters for an international park that included some of the Gulf and San Juan Islands. And they had done a study. And the conclusion of the study was that the problems of Point Roberts were occasioned by the fact that there was a resident population, and a gradual reduction and elimination of that population would in and of itself resolve the problems. In other words, get rid of the people, get rid of the problems.
Mm-hmm.
And we didn't take very kindly to that, so we appealed to the county, and the county went to support us, and then we were advised, we can't represent you, we can only represent citizens getting into the state level and on upwards. So we hurriedly formed the U.S. Registered Voters Association to have a body that could represent the people of Point Roberts, and that is how the voters came about it.
Did you go to Washington, D.C.? Was there anyone that went to D.C. to fight for this?
No,
No.
but we
Just
had a senator. I went to Washington, D.C. and found some stuff out that was helpful. We had Senator Magnuson, who probably saved us. And Magnuson and the fish, don't you think, Polly?
Yes, plus the fact that they included the Gulf Islands and some of the San Juans, was it?
Yep, yeah.
I just recently listened to a tape, I should lend it to you, of the IJC meeting. There was somebody from the fishing, representing fishermen, that was against the proposal. There was somebody from the island county, I believe, that said they didn't have enough information, they could not support it at that time. And didn't the First Nations people come out and they had something to say too at one of the meetings?
I don't recall one way or the other. The people over in the Gulf Islands were not happy either.
They were not happy.
So if they hadn't included those islands, but I think probably the ultimate key was the fact that at that time the largest salmon fishery along the west coast was off of Point Roberts.
Mm-hmm.
And the U.S. didn't want to lose their salmon fishery.
Or the taxes that they got off that, yeah.
Yeah. So all of that helped. But Senator Magnuson did go to bat for us. And was much appreciated. But we fought like tigers, and nobody had groceries in their cupboard or fed their kids properly or anything. We were at meetings all the time.
Yeah, it was a tough time.
Well, and it went on and on and on. It was. We were fighting some mighty big guns because that had been planned and orchestrated well in advance of having it dropped on us.
Yes, it did. They had at least one huge meeting here at the cannery, at that time the cannery. Was there more than one meeting here? Large meeting?
There were numerous meetings here. One on a semi-local level that I find memorable was held over at the old Grange Hall in the summer. And by that time, our planner, Mr. Fulton, knew that it would not be wise for him to set foot on Point Roberts. So he sent an assistant, it was his only assistant up. And so on this hot day, we went over, we thought well in advance, most of us, and only to find that all of the seating in the Grange Hall was occupied by people who were in favor of the International Park and the IJC. So the rest of us stood outside. And then the assistant made a motion and said, would everyone who's in favor please stand up? That meeting is just etched in my mind. So we're out there standing out, what are we to do? And of course their motion carried.
Were there more people that were in favor of making it an international park, or
No,
no?
No.
no, heavens no.
So, just a few people?
Enough to
Well,
fill the range all.
the main ones that were in favor of it are the ones that instigated it, including Colonel Finch, I suspect.
Okay.
Because if they're made an international park, who had a lot of land to sell?
That's right. Interesting.
So was he the main proponent for it, or was there, who actually came up with the idea for?
Well,
There had to be someone who came up.
it wasn't one person. I spent a lot of time at the Vancouver Library back then researching, and the Greater Vancouver Regional District had previously planned in Zone Point Roberts 2 or 3 times. If you dig in the archives there, I'm sure you can still find those records. They considered their manifest destiny to own Point Roberts.
There's a challenge, Gary.
Yeah.
Interesting.
No, I had all that paperwork for a very long time, so it was a plan. They were just going to sandbag us because there were just a handful of people out here. What were we going to do about it? And as Polly said, if they hadn't reached out and included some of the Gulf and San Juan Islands, they'd have probably pulled it off.
It would have bulldozed right over us.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Not without a fight, bigger fight, but I think we would have been bulldozed.
Yeah, they figured it was fait accompli.
Mm-hmm.
It's a lot, for such a small community, we got a lot of fighting spirit, that's for sure. We seem to always be fighting, keeping everybody back, keeping the big guns away, and keeping our little town the way we like it. The reason we're living here.
That's right.
Well, and it's kind of like a family. They squabble among themselves, but if they come in from outside, just as with this towers thing,
Right.
they thought they were going to smoke through too, but the people do band together and they will fight off anything that threatens them.
That's true.
Yeah. Don't you get tired of fighting though? When the next thing comes along, I'm thinking, just leave us alone. We need to recover.
Yeah, I'm tired of being threatened.
Yeah.
But each
Yes.
one,
That's what it
it's
is.
a new plan because they've never done it before.
Yeah.
And they come out and I think they see our little pond and they think, I'm a big frog. I'll be an even bigger frog in this little pond because look at them.
Yeah.
Just look at them.
Yeah.
Does this sort of thing happen like in the San Juan Islands too? Or why do they just pick on Point Roberts? Because it's sort of similar in a lot of respects.
Well, because it's hooked to Canada.
Oh, that's the problem.
I would think so.
Yeah.
I would think so.
Yeah.
And usually there's, well, it's either or both, political advantage and money.
Money's a lot behind it. They
Yeah.
think they're gonna sweep in and make a
Make a
fortune, I
buck,
guess,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
At one point, somebody was pushing for us to become a free port.
Yeah.
That was just an idea, but that was another zany idea.
Well, that was one of the proposals to offset the IJC. Was, well, if we were Freeport, you have to leave us alone. I don't know. I think everyone that buys the point for the first time has some plan that they can participate in.
Remember the racetrack? We were going to have a racetrack.
Well, I think
Remember?
we did.
The horse race, the one up at, it would have been across from the marina, the Erickson property.
Oh, right, it was gonna be,
James.
it was gonna be satellite racing.
Well, no, it was gonna be a racetrack.
Actually,
a horse-
racetrack.
A horse
racetrack?
racetrack.
Yeah.
James O.
Yeah.
Remember?
Yeah, that was being worked on. Oh,
Histrionics.
actually, it was before my time here, but I think Wayland's had a racetrack
They did have a
down in
racetrack.
Boundary
Yeah, they
Bay.
did.
Yeah.
But this was
This was
in the
gonna be-
80s, wasn't it? 1980s
Well,
or 90s?
90s because I was here.
Yeah.
It was in the latter half of the 90s.
Yeah, there was the proposal for the racetrack, so, yeah, it's interesting, everybody comes with their grand ideas. I think also once the point got water, right, that opened up another whole, grand ideas kind of, everybody wanted to build out shopping malls and
Well, then they would
once we
have
got the
needed,
water from Canada.
Was
Yeah.
there not something to develop Lily Point at one time?
Yes, yep.
I guess that would have happened numerous times over
Yeah.
the years,
Oh,
wouldn't it?
there
Lily Point was a big one.
There's numerous schemes.
Yep.
Do you know how early that the first proposal came in on that, Ruby?
Probably long before I came here, I don't know. The most recent one, no, the most recent one was the one that the Nielsen Group was
The
planning.
consortium.
What's that,
Yeah.
the golf course and the,
No, Lily Point.
For Lily
Yeah.
Point, a golf
Yeah.
course and
Condos.
Condos.
Of course, and yeah.
I believe that's what their plan was.
Yeah.
and back in the I think it was the 1950s, Runa Thordarson wrote to the state asking them to purchase Lily Point from Del Monte. They had taken over from the Alaska Packers Association to turn it into a park, a state park. And they said, there's not enough people up there. We're not going to just cater to, I believe the wording was Canadians. So they refused to buy it. And at that point, it would have been pretty cheap. Yeah. And it eventually wound up to be a park, so.
Yeah.
Any idea what the state paid for it, had to pay for it eventually?
Oh, the state didn't pay for it.
Or they didn't?
No,
How did it come to
Lily
be?
Point became a park from the Land Trust. Well, you know more about this.
Well,
Land
Department-
Trust and
I think the Department of Ecology was involved, the
okay.
Wacom Land Trust, the Nature
and private
Conser-
donations.
They
Then there's
raised the money
Nature
then.
Conservancy, yeah, and the county,
That's good.
and Wacom County.
Hmm.
There's a group effort
Mhm.
by a state and local,
Mhm.
yeah.
And what was that purchase price? Do you remember?
I don't, I'd have to go back and
I
look,
don't either.
yeah.
I don't think it was a great amount considering the amount of land, including the tidelines.
Right,
I spent a lot of time there as a kid.
yeah.
Yes.
We still spend a lot of
fun.
time there. And now we have a park on all four corners, so we're pretty lucky
Yeah.
to be a small community and have parks on all four corners.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Per capita,
yes, per capita.
we're way over the top
Yeah.
for parks.
Yeah.
That's one of the things when people come out here to write about Point Roberts, they look at the parks right away.
Yeah,
We had a reporter from Associated Press out here yesterday, and that's the first thing he did is go
Really?
to the parks.
Oh,
So,
okay.
and the last couple people have written articles. They did. Our parks are one of the most attractive things about Point Roberts right now. People love them. I know. I help take care of them. I do trash pickup when they lose their help over. When Aaron loses his help over at Lighthouse Park, in the fall and the winter and springtime, they need help. So there's a few of us who volunteer and go out and try and take care of them because the county only gives one person,
yeah, that's
and
true.
one person for 4 parks is very difficult.
Yeah,
Well, if people really appreciated our having so many parks, and a great many people who use them do not live here, you'd think they'd pick up their trash, wouldn't you?
You
Yes.
think so?
Some things never change.
Yeah.
No.
People are slobs.
Yeah.
yeah,
They, especially when you go out there and you take care of it, and you don't like seeing it when there's trash on the ground. So
Yeah, I think the only thing that I truly miss about Point Roberts is down at Maple Beach. That has developed so much there. It it's not like the old beach that I remember, with the crowds and parking on the seawall, or even
Yeah.
before the seawall was there,
You're right, Jim.
and now it's all housing.
Yeah.
It's too bad that couldn't have maybe been set aside, or a small portion of it.
Well, actually, the county owns the tidelands now, the Whalen heirs.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yes.
they donated the.
That is
It's,
part.
it's the
Yeah,
Wacom,
part.
it's the Maple Beach Marine Reserve. That's,
Oh, that's good to know.
Yeah.
but the other thing the county did is, was it 2 years ago? They
Well,
put some parking.
Yeah,
They
we had
put
to
a little
fight to get some parking
down
some
there.
public parking down
Well,
at the
if you
beach
go
because
back
they
to
don't
the
really
old-
want you to come down and park. So we did get some parking.
Well,
Unfortunately,
are they allowing them to
the
park?
property owners are parking in the public parking spot, so it becomes a little
Yeah.
where's the
Little
parking?
battle.
Well,
Yeah.
are they
But, uh,
permitting parking along the seawall?
No.
No.
When if you go back through those old pictures, which all of
I
you people
know.
do all the
It's
time,
fantastic.
they always used to park
Right.
along where the seawall is,
Right.
and I see no reason why they shouldn't.
Well, it's
The owners' views that I think some of the owners down there don't like having cars.
Well,
parked.
they'd have to remove the benches that are there, and then it would become they'd have to do another study because of just what
Yeah.
you talked about, another study with regards to parking. I wanted it to have parking along the seawall and like a one way down and a loop so that people,
That would have actually been
Yeah.
yeah, so that
Good
you can
idea.
come down and park and then get out and walk around. But
Right.
it's it's a bit
I
problematic.
I just feel it was a real loss for the point
Oh,
too, for that
absolutely.
of all places. I mean, that
Yep.
was historically the
Yeah.
the summer villa of Point Roberts.
The
down
warmest
there.
swimming beach
Yeah.
in Point
Yeah.
Roberts. And so the county, Whatcom County Parks owns from Roosevelt to the middle of Garth, the beach. But when you drive down there as a tourist, you don't really, you may stumble across a parking spot. I've just asked the Rod Lamb at the county. I talked about it with him, but now I have to go to Public Works to ask them to at least put a sign
Yeah.
that says where there's public parking. Because there is no sign, so
No.
you really don't see it.
It's like
You don't-
have a look, but don't stop.
but don't stop, keep going.
Stop, yeah.
So,
Well, who could actually give permission to park along the seawall? Public Works?
Public Works, yeah. And that was one of the, that was one of the proposals that we proposed, but then they come back with all kinds of, oh, we can't do that because we need a study from this and that. So they did do a few spots on Alder, Birch, Cedar, and Roosevelt, and that's about as good as we're gonna get.
So
I thi-
Boundary Bay on the Canadian side is exactly the same
Yeah.
circumstance. It's all privately owned now, and yet the access trails to the beach, which are required by law every couple of 100 feet, are still existing, but
You can't get,
there's nowhere to park. Everything's
Yeah.
private, so
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
these trails become redundant in a way,
Yeah.
from a long gone era, I guess.
So do you think when they lost the store down there, that was kind of the end of the era for
Probably
Maple
more like
Beach?
when the customs closed down.
when the
there.
customs closed down there?
Yeah. There was just such huge
Yeah.
crowds down there. It was so much fun.
yeah, you see it in all the photos, the old photos. Everybody just walking, biking, kids, dogs, people, everywhere.
Oh, yeah.
So
I would guess that the value of the property contributed to some of the change too.
Oh, absolutely.
Quite possibly.
And I think the property owners at the time, if I remember correctly, were saying that they didn't want parking on even on the west side of the street, and they put up barriers so nobody can park on the west side of the street because they say they own the street. So
Oh.
yeah, so it would
I
have
don't
been
think-
it would have
They don't
been
own
it would have been a battle between Public Works and property owners, and they didn't want to take that on. That was one of the things that we discussed. So
Well, them saying they own the street doesn't make it necessarily so.
but Public
The
Works
count-
didn't want to take that tackle that problem.
and the county owns that street.
So
Well,
Yeah.
in its heyday, though, down there, it was a lot of fun, like you say.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah.
There was
Yeah.
the old roller rink, which didn't
Yeah.
last. It lasted a few years, but not.
Didn't they? The roller rink turned into like a go-kart track of some
It
kind. They
did.
used to have
They
those
rolled, yeah.
old-fashioned cars that were in there with the motors on them. I
Yeah.
remember that.
And then there were 2 stores.
Yeah.
Maybe even way back before my time, there was maybe 3 stores.
Well, there would have been Metcalf's right on the border on the Canadian side.
Right.
Then there was Clark's
Yeah.
and
Isn't
And the
Metcalf's
Maples.
building still there?
no, that's,
they tore it
that's
down.
gone.
Just a few months ago, they tore it down.
Well, that was an anomaly. You went in on the U.S. side and you were immediately in Canada
Yeah.
Yeah.
with no customs.
No customs, no passport.
Yeah.
You had your fish and chips or whatever you were having, and then you went back out.
Or you could go out on the Canadian side if you,
Yeah,
if you
that's
so
right, yeah.
chose.
They used to have great dances there in the summer on Friday
did.
nights, and
Yeah.
it was a
Well,
good
they-
time down there.
I don't think there are dances anymore, are there?
Not that I'm aware of. No.
People meet on the internet now.
Yeah.
Well, I'll tell you, I feel as though I just landed here from a distant planet because I can't relate to anything that people are saying, doing, even what they're eating. You know?
Like paleo food. What?
My mom says the same thing, so it's not just you.
And your mom and I managed to achieve our various ages without eating any kale or quinoa too.